Well, wiretapping the internet. That's the FBI's new mission. Traditionally, they've been able to get a warrant to tap into telephones, but today, more people are communicating through the internet by email, Skype, social media, and instant messaging. And this poses a challenge for the FBI. They're finding it harder to wiretap websites, calling it a going dark problem. And now they're taking action to change this. An article on CNET reveals the FBI's push to force internet giants like Google, Facebook, and Yahoo to alter their code to ensure that law enforcement can easily wiretap the websites. The FBI's plan would amend a 1994 law that applies to wiretapping phones. They want to expand that power to web companies. So is this another attack on your online freedoms, or is it necessary to ensure national security? David Seaman, journalist and host of the DL Show, joins us now to dig deeper into this. Welcome, David. So should people be concerned about this?
It's great to be back on, Liz. People should be concerned. I want to choose my words very carefully here. The legislation we've seen over the past few months, including CISPA, and now this FBI request to have backdoor access to people's Facebook activity. We're talking about American citizens, not people in Afghanistan in a cave. They aren't the ones sending out friend requests and talking on Facebook. We're talking about you and me. The government wants intimate access to what we're doing online. And through CISPA, they would nullify the Fourth Amendment. Like I said, I want to be careful with what I say here, but I do believe if Jefferson and Washington were alive today, they would be calling for regime change. This is absolutely ludicrous. And I'm not some peacenik or hippie. You know, I'm aware that there are some people out there who want to cause the United States of America harm. And I'm all for spying on those people. Read and listen to every single word they say and go get them. You know, turn their little neck of the woods into a parking lot for all I care. So I'm not opposed to spying on our enemies. I'm opposed to spying on hundreds of thousands, perhaps even millions of Americans who have committed no crime and are just trying to use the internet to communicate.
Now, traditionally, David, the FBI, they have had the ability to wiretap phones, but now more people are communicating other ways. So does it make sense that they would be able to wiretap these newer forms of communication?
Liz, it absolutely makes sense that they would want to update some of this language because, as you pointed out, people are not using phones predominantly anymore. They use the internet to communicate, and we use text messages and that sort of thing. The problem here is I see all of these things now as connected. And I'm not a conspiracy theorist. I'm not some weirdo. My background is in personal finance and financial journalism. But it's hard to disregard what is happening. Over the past few months, we had SOPA, which is really a career killer. To push something that radical and ludicrous, that could kill the career of any politician who supported it. And then they turn around and they push CISPA, which is even worse. And it's backed by these extremely powerful tech companies affiliated with the Pentagon, tech companies that most people don't even know about and have never heard of. These are not well-known companies, but they have tremendous lobbying power. And I think there's this weird gray area where they're collecting this information, and it's clearly not related to terrorism investigations. How many people in the U.S. are actively plotting terrorist attacks? Certainly not hundreds of thousands, and yet hundreds of thousands of national security letters, or NSLs, have been issued over the past few years, according to some experts on this issue. So what's going to happen when they have backdoor access to Facebook and to Twitter and to Google+? Could be tens of millions of people who could have their information compromised, and a number of people within the government would have access to your most intimate communications, dirty messages you send to your girlfriend, health conditions that you search for on Google to find out about, things like that.
But wouldn't they need a warrant, David, in order to get this information or to spy on people?
Under CISPA, they would not need a warrant. If CISPA passes, it already passed the House, now it's headed to a Senate vote, and Obama's administration has threatened to veto it, but they did the same thing with the NDAA, and then he went ahead and signed it anyway. If that becomes law, then it changes the game. Then the FBI has backdoor access, and they can go in without a warrant. As it stands, you know, if they want to monitor somebody's Facebook activity and they have a legitimate warrant, I'm all for that. I'm aware that there is crime out there, there are bad guys, and we should keep an eye on them. But I'm opposed to spying on millions of Americans. And I feel like the government is already doing these things and is now looking for the legal justification to basically cover themselves. Why do I think they're doing these things? Because they're building a $2 billion data center. And Wired magazine has reported on this. You guys have reported on it. $2 billion data center in the Utah desert to analyze, log, and go through our communications, you and me, American citizens, not people in Afghanistan.
So it sounds, David, like you're worried that if the FBI is granted this power, there is this capacity to abuse it.
I'm absolutely worried. The problem, I mean, governments throughout history have always tried to collect more and more power. That's really just the nature of things. And you even accept a certain level of corruption, right? Because that's what governments do, is they gain more power and more resources over time. The problem is, for the first time in human history, we actually have technology at a level, and this is just over the past few years, we have technology at a level where it's cheap enough and easy enough for governments to actually monitor and analyze everything we do, online and offline, with closed cameras. It's really weird. It's like we're now in this state where, and former NSA officials have said this, we're like this close to being in a totalitarian state. We have the technology, they're passing the legislation to make it possible, and the thing that scares me most is that when you turn on most news networks, you turn on CNN or MSNBC, they don't talk about this. Just the other day, the co-founder of Reddit was on CNN, and he mentioned CISPA. He said he doesn't plan to invest in Facebook because of their pro-CISPA policy. And the anchor was just like a deer in headlights, right? She didn't want to address it. None of the other people on the panel wanted to address it, and so they just move on. And it's the same thing when Ron Paul is talking and they're covering one of his campaign speeches. He talks about CISPA. He talks about NDAA. He talks about warrantless wiretapping of American citizens, and then they just cut away. And they're like, that was Ron Paul, everyone. And they don't actually put these things into context, and these are huge issues. So that's what scares me. I know something's going on because it's not being covered in the news.
Well, we here at RT have spent a good amount of time covering CISPA and NDAA and some of these issues. David, this plan would require big companies, Google and Facebook, for example, to alter their code so the FBI can wiretap their sites. Do you think the big companies will be on board with this?
I think they will. I wish that the CEOs and executives of these companies were patriotic, but I think at the end of the day, they just care about the bottom line. And particularly with CISPA and with this backdoor access also, if the government says to them, look, you're safe, give us this information and you get litigation immunity, nobody can come after you, we're not going to come after you, we're not going to overregulate you or drive you out of business, these companies just go along with it. They don't care about you and me. They don't care about our privacy. They care about their shareholders. And I'm a capitalist, so I don't have a problem with that in theory, but at the same time, I'm also an American citizen, and I don't want to see us turn into a full-blown police state, which is that's where we're headed. People need to talk about this. The other day in the news, someone in the audience asked Mitt Romney if he thought that Obama had committed treason. And then the mainstream media sort of jumped on it, and they were just basically mocking this woman without actually bringing into context the fact that Obama has signed some treasonous things into law over the past few months, and without bringing into context the fact that the government is rapidly trying to look at our online communications. And this backdoor access, like I said, in principle it's fine, but in practice, I believe it will be misused.
Now, David, I do want to bring up the government's response to this. The FBI calls this problem going dark, meaning they are no longer able to wiretap suspects, and they say this could pose a problem for people's security. Here's what a representative of the FBI told CNET today. It states, quote, a growing gap exists between the statutory authority of law enforcement to intercept electronic communications pursuant to court order and our practical ability to intercept those communications. The FBI believes that if this gap continues to grow, there is a very real risk of the government going dark, resulting in an increased risk to national security and public safety. So, David, what is your response to this?
I don't think they ever went dark. I think when I even send an email to one of your producers, it's being stored on a server somewhere at the NSA. I'm like 100% certain of that. So do they want better access for law enforcement reasons? Yes. And is that legitimate? Sure. If you get a court order and it's authorized, go ahead and do it. But again, where is this threat coming from? If there are hundreds of thousands of potential terrorists here in the U.S. and they're all communicating over Facebook, let's identify these people and let's kick them out of the country so they're not a threat anymore. But I think the problem here is that this is kind of a boogeyman. There are only a handful of people who are a genuine threat, and then a lot of it is just flat-out totalitarian spying. And we've seen things recently. All of my readers, not all of them, a lot of them seem concerned about this resettlement manual that the Army put out. And people kept telling me, you have to look into this and report on it. And I was skeptical, but I looked it up. I downloaded off of public intelligence, and there are plans for resettlement camps even in the U.S. It's not as bad as some people are making it out to be, but these are weird times. Will the government misuse their wiretap and their Facebook backdoor access to see what our political views are and to see where we stand? I believe they very well could, and I think that's a risk that we need to address with new legislation to make sure that this is never misused.
All right, David, we're out of time, but thank you very much for coming on the show today. That was David Seaman, journalist and host of the DL Show.